Rev up your engines!
Now here's one that's hilarious if it didn't happen to you. Not so much for this guy. He takes his Lexus to a Jiffy Lube and the engine blows up because they didn't put any oil in it. He had a Lexus ES350, very expensive engine, took it in, and he said, the oil light's on. It sounds kind of weird. And they said, well, we don't know. Something's wrong with your oil light. We can't reset it. Just take it home. So he's driving home, the engine blows up because there's no oil in it, right? These idiots at the Jiffy Lube were so stupid. The oil light for the engine was on, right? Now, if the oil light for your engine is on, what's the first thing you should do? Check the oil. Maybe it's low on oil. In this case, they didn't put any back in the car. But the idiots just said, well, we don't know, something's wrong with your warning light. We can't figure out how to reset it. Yeah, you're not going to reset it because there was no oil in the engine, and it's telling it there's no oil. There's no oil pressure, right? Well, they didn't bother to check the oil that they supposedly changed. They did empty it out. I'll give them that, but they didn't put anything back in. They're saying, well, we'll put a used engine. So I don't want some used piece of crap engine. I want a new one. Well, Gregory Greer is peed off at the Jiffy Lube. They're offering to put a junkyard used engine in, but I agree with them. When do you want to take hot luck with that? You had a perfectly good running car in it before they forgot to put oil back in. So he was smart enough. He went back to the Jiffy Lube, looked at their surveillance. They had surveillance, right? And lo and behold, there's a picture of the guys draining the oil out of his Lexus. There's no picture of them putting oil in. They didn't put any oil back in, right? Now, they offered him $7,983.14. That's the cost they say of putting a used engine. And his insurance company gave him almost $6,000. So he's peed that they're not going to give him a new engine. At least he got money out of the deal. Realize each of these Jiffy Lube things are independently operated. The company itself, Jiffy Lube, isn't responsible for stuff. It's the person who owns and operates the thing. And at least from his insurance and their insurance, he got $14,000 out of it, which is a heck of a lot better than what I've seen in Houston, where some people go to one of those places and they don't offer them anything and they got to take them to court. And here's what the Jiffy Lube people say. Despite our best efforts, unfortunately, mistakes happen. And we regret that Mr. Greer's experience failed to meet his expectation and that we've been unable to remedy his vehicle's condition. When you hired idiots that took the oil out and didn't put oil in, but then had the gall to say, well, your oil light's on. We don't know how to reset it. Take it to the Lexus dealer. So he drives it away. It's got no oil in it. And the engine goes out. That's just plain stupidity. But see, that's the problem. With places like that, they hire minimum wage people doing the work. Usually they have no training at all. You're not getting that many quality people working at these places. So this is why I make my videos. Learn how to change your oil yourself. And don't trust these clowns to forget to put the oil back in. DMW DV15 says, I have high coolant pressure. I got a 2003 Rodeo. I have high coolant pressure and overheating. I figured I had a bad head gasket, took the heads off, put a gasket bed together, and it still does it. Now, could the head be cracked or something else? I'm stumped. You got it back together and you got pressure and it's overheating. So, do my video, how to tell if your head gasket is blown. Scotty, do the test, and if the blue liquid turns yellow, you'll know something's cracked in the engine. Now, it could be the head, it could be the block, could be lots of things. That's why when people have problems, it's best to go to a machine shop. It could easily have a crack in it. And that block could too, because modern vehicles have aluminum blocks. And they'll crack and get fissures in them too. But first, you got it together and it's running. Do that test. Could be something else, but if it shows that, yes, indeed, exhaust gas in the radiator, then yeah, you got either a cracked head or a block. And I mean, with the mileage, you said you got 300-something thousand miles. You might be better off just getting another engine. Forget yours. RW3570 says, can you believe this? There's a 2007 Honda Ridgeline truck which has over 1.3 million miles selling at AutoNation, and they want $9,880. What do you think? Should I buy it? As a conversation piece, sure. I would not buy a vehicle with 1.3 million for 10 grand because, hey, there could hardly be anything left with it. I'm sure some things have been replaced, but that's so much miles. Almost everything is going to be eventually breaking. Wheel bearings, seals, you name it, brake system, everything, fuel injection system, you name it. Interesting that it went that far. I would have liked to know the history of it. Did it go through different transmissions or engines? And it's an '07 with 1 million miles on it, so obviously did a lot of highway driving, so that would make sense. But I don't think I'd buy it unless I wanted a collector's item to say, look, my Honda's got over 1 million miles on it. Barry Lou says, I got a 2012 Malibu. The temperature gauge reading is really high. It's showing high, way out of bounds. There's no codes, and I can read the correct ECT temperature via a code reader. You can give me all the information, but I'm assuming you're reading the correct temperature in the reader, and that's not hot, but your gauge is showing that it's hot. You probably have a bad gauge in the dash. It's typical. Realize those dashes that in the Malibus are made in China. They're cheap junk. They warp and they break. It could easily be the dash unit is going bad, because if your scan tool says it's got the correct coolant temperature on it, that means the sensor's working, because that sensor gives the information to your scan tool. So that's working. Odds are your dash unit has gone bad. They're so expensive to buy the dashes, if you're worried, you might just get a universal temperature gauge and mount it somewhere on the dash, and you can easily hook that up to the sensor and just use that to read it rather than having to replace the whole dash. Here's one that really pisses me off. Biden's giving GM and LG $2.5 billion loan to build battery factories. Now, when did private companies get government money to run their business? I don't comprehend this at all. They talk like, oh, we're going to help all these people. All the money goes to the corporations. It's absolutely, patently absurd. If you remember recently, they signed that law in saying that the railroad strikers couldn't go on strike because, oh, well, this old labor law from 1920-something, you can't go on strike. You workers can't go on strike because they wanted to get better health benefits and get paid leave while they're doing health stuff, right? And the Democrats that are supposedly all for the workers, hey, they didn't side for the workers there. Here, now they're giving $2.5 billion of our money to GM and LG. Realize LG is a Korean company, too. So it's kind of amazing what happens to our taxpayer dollars going to these corporations. It doesn't make any sense. But, of course, they got them in the back pocket. They get these guys elected, and they do whatever they're told. We as the taxpayers give companies money to build their factories. I mean, when did this nonsense start up? It's absurd that they have elections and they talk about how they're going to help everybody out. Then what do? They give all our taxpayer money to corporations so they can make more money. Where's the logic in that? Well, of course, they've got very large donations that they give to the politicians. They're handing money hand over fist. I don't understand. Why are we giving money to corporations to do stuff? Aren't they supposed to get their own funding to do their own stuff? Nobody's giving us money to start businesses, but they're corporations. They're different. Yeah. They're different. They got a lot of lobbyists in there that have the money funneled into their corporations that we're paying. Well, it looks like Subaru isn't doing such a hot job. They're just recalling 270,000 of the cars because they might start on fire. These are 2019 to 2022 Subaru Ascents. Turns out they might not have put the battery wiring on correctly. They get loose, corroded. Of course, that can start a fire. And in this case, it is the ground terminal on, believe it or not, there's actually a part called the positive temperature coefficient heater. And since it's not right, the ground's loose, it'll heat up, could start a fire. Voila, there goes your Subaru. There's over 271,000 of them under this recall. And so Subaru's telling people, well, don't park your car in your garage or near any structures or trees. And don't leave your car running when you're not in it. If you turn it off, there's less of a chance of it starting on fire. It still can, but a lot less. So if you own one of these Subarus, well, it looks like you're not be able to park in your heated garage unless you might burn your house down because they didn't build them right. Well, I guess finally the Tesla owners are wising up. It turns out that Tesla approval ratings are dipping into negative territory now. Maybe the people that are buying them are realizing what piles of junk they are, right? A UK research company called YouGov, and they said it fell rather quickly. It's the start of 2022, according to them. Tesla had a 5.9% approval rating. Not all that great when you think about it, 5.9%. But by early November, it went down to minus 1.4. So it was barely positive, and now it's going into the negative. Even the people that are owning these things are realizing, hey, they're not so hot. And of course, I find it hilarious now. Poor old Elon, he's not the richest man in the world anymore. It's the guy who runs the giant French conglomerate that has Hennessy and all these rich products. But people are looking more negatively on Tesla. And if you ask me, this is just the beginning of it. People will find out, hey, these things aren't that good in the winter, cold weather. They don't go as far. Taking long distance trips is a hassle. Getting them fixed is a hassle. There's a lot of negatives to these things. And the quality of them is just garbage for the money that you're paying. Socrates says, my heater only works when I'm driving at higher speeds. When I'm idling or going slow, it doesn't get hot. But at high speeds, it works. All right, well, unfortunately, the numero uno problem that does that is your heater core's clogged up. And when you go faster, the pump's pumping harder, spinning faster, and it can push the sludge kind of out of the way in the heater core. You can attempt to flush it out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I got a video on flushing your heater core. You take the two hoses off that go into the firewall, and you put flush through the firewall into the heater core and try to flush the crud out, right? If that doesn't work, you got to replace the heater core, and that's a fortune on most cars. But on the other hand, sometimes if you're just low on coolant and you have air in your cooling system, air won't work in a heater very well. So you won't get it until you go faster, and then some of the water starts sloshing inside, and it works better. So pray when you check your radiator cap in the morning when it's cold that it's low and it just needs more coolant. It could just be low and have air in the system. Pray it's that and not a clogged heater core. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.